Well, hello, everybody. This is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine, and this is Rattlecast number 9. We have Kat Lehmann on the line. She's going to be joining us in just a little bit to talk about her book, which I can put on screen right now really quick. Her book is Stumbling Toward Happiness, which we'll be looking at in just a moment. But first, I think it's always nice to start out with a warm-up poem, just to kind of get the ball rolling and let people stream in to the stream and join us. And so I thought I'd read the new issue of Rattle is just out, and I thought I'd read a poem from the new issue. And it's also back to school time, and all the kids are out there. And next week's poet, Alexandre, has a poem. It's kind of a dark school poem. A high school kind of poem. I thought maybe we'd read that because she's going to be the featured poet next week. And here it is. This is Dissection by Alexandre. And actually, the Wrightwood Literary Festival is coming up in 2 weeks. And last year, Alexandre was there. And she took this poem to, I have a workshop I do, like just a little editing round circle, like a critiquing group that we do in the morning workshop at the Wrightwood Literary Festival. And she brought this poem, and she read it for the class and showed it to everybody. And I said, well, there's nothing I can improve about this poem. I think maybe you should submit it somewhere and maybe Rattle. And then a few months later, she did. And so here it is. This is Dissection by Alexandre. Dissection. Once on the bus ride to school, the girl saw a man smash another man's head into the sidewalk. The city bus kept moving down Atlantic, past the diner where pies were stacked like beacons, beyond metal carts bulging with water bottles, bond businesses, billboards holding out impossible promises, her backpack full of biology, English, history, Spanish, math. The bell would ring, the teachers pacing linoleum floors would mark her papers with ink. The day went on like this, except for in biology class, where the girl was given a wrinkled, formaldehyde mink with pink skin, like a baby, but with a tail and 2 sharp teeth. Nothing was soft, its insides rubbery, and she wanted what was soft. Oatmeal with cream for breakfast, the cotton threads of a gray sweatshirt that matched this morning sky. And they were told to cut the yellow fat of its body open, but also to respect the mink, its worm esophagus, threaded muscles, marble eyes. She took the bus home at 2:40 p.m., remembering the man framed in the window, the silent switching back and forth of skull, sidewalk, skull, the mink wrapped in plastic, its mouth hanging open, what tools she had laid out on the scratched table, scalpel, scissors, hands, what is cut away and what remains. The girl closed her eyes, pushed herself against the bus's exoskeleton, went over again the systems, respiratory, circulatory, digestive, until she arrived home, peeling all that death off her shoulders. The girl ate dinner because what was done was done. Nothing would bring the mink back, and the man was okay, or he wasn't. So that was Alexandre reading Dissections. She'll be the featured poet next week. So you can hear more about that in her book. It's too far away to reach, but her new book will be the one we're going over to next week. And I thought it'd be interesting to read that poem, not only because it's back to school time, but also because our poet today is a Ph.D. biochemist. So I'm sure Kat Lehmann was dissecting a lot of things back in school too. And her book, like I said before, is Stumbling Toward Happiness. Kat Lehmann, she's a Ph.D. scientist and a happiness and personal empowerment author. And she's been writing poetry, I think, not for all that long, just maybe 5 or 10 years or something. I'm not sure exactly what. But she is a scientist by training, has been working as a scientist for 30 years, and then she started blogging, I think, and then turned to poetry. Now she's the author of 3 books in her own press. So she's an amazing poet and author, and she's with us right now. Just 1 second, let me bring her in. Here she is, Kat Lehmann. Say hi, Kat.
Hi, Tim. It's great to be here on the Rattlecast. I'm really excited.
Yeah, I'm really glad to have you. I think it's really, really fascinating that you're a PhD in biochemistry, because that was my career path. I think we talked about this on Facebook one time, but I don't have a PhD. I don't even have a degree. I didn't finish my my thesis. So I sort of have I took the classes as an undergrad and then didn't finish, but but it's sort of imagine you as being someone I could have become or something. So it's kind of interesting to see the way the world works, and that it spirals all back, and you become a poet anyway.
That's right, and vice versa, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of funny how lives kind of intertwine that way, right? And career paths and things. And it's interesting because like with biochemistry, that I always found like the more deep you look into something, the more you see the poetry in things. I mean, it just becomes this thing you can't even, like, it's so elegant. You can't even describe it. So it's not, to me, it's not that far away.
Yeah, no, maybe we should just start talking about that. I was gonna have you read a poem first, but since we're kind of already accidentally talking about it, it's just such an interesting, people think of like the STEM classes as not being art. And so it's an interesting thing. We did a whole Science Poets issue back in maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And so there are a lot of people who do both science and poetry, but it's not something that the general public kind of thinks is related. So how do you think science and poetry are related?
Well, I mean, I think that's sort of what I said, it kind of explains it a bit. For me, my first poem that I ever wrote was a sonnet in iambic pentameter in high school, which I think is what I thought poetry was. And it wasn't until I went to graduate school that in my 20s I discovered poetry. And so I actually got in the habit of being in lab all day for like 12 hours and then coming home and reading poetry for another 3 or 4 hours. And so to me, it was actually a really nice balance of the different parts of my brain, but still sort of finding the beauty of nature in different ways. But I got really obsessed about poetry in my 20s. Anyone who knew me at that time can say, and just like trying to push what's possible in language.
Yeah, that was the same. That was the same experience for me. And actually, what happened is, I started taking just a few creative writing classes, and I thought, well, maybe I'll dual major in English because this is really fun. And then I ended up, having a lab day where I was supposed to have like a 3-hour lab and do something, and I just didn't show up because I was like in the middle of writing, I think, a short story, not a poem. But and then I just decided, well, I'll just fake the lab, and then I realized, wait a minute, I'm faking my labs and staying home to write. So maybe this isn't the job for me. So what is it specifically that you do as a scientist? I think it read that you're an ethicist. Is that science ethics?
Yeah, well, so I was a biochemist, and I am a biochemist, but I was actively doing lab research for many years. I was studying RNA protein interactions, and then it kind of got to a point where, honestly, it became a little bit difficult as a woman in science, and I thought, this isn't really what I want to spend the rest of my life. Like, this is not the wall I want to throw myself against for the rest of my life. And so I kind of thought, well, like, what else can I do with a Ph.D. in biochemistry? And that's when I really started to explore other things. I found was ethics, sort of, for so I was at Yale University, and I would review research studies that involve humans, say clinical trials or like psychology or economics experiments, and make sure that they were compliant with the regs and that they were ethical. And it was really kind of a fun way to try to make science a better place, and sort of to learn about a lot of different types of science and what was going on. So anyway, but that's what I was doing. That's what I'm doing now, is that, and I'm managing clinical trials, like the regulatory startup of clinical trials as well.
Okay, I see.
So that's just my
And you're still working. You're still working in that full time and finding time to read poems.
Part-time now, which is, it's good. It's some nice balance between the writing, and I've got 2 kids, and the science. So it's kind of all somehow clicked together into this puzzle that's sort of at the moment working. So
yeah. Well, you want to read a poem to start us off?
But about like what would be a good one to just start with, like how does a biochemist become a poet, or and just like, and I came to that feeling of wholeness, and so I kind of wanted to read isness.
I forgot to say, let me know the page number,
Stumbling toward kind of, yeah.
and then I can show it on screen.
54?
Yeah, 54. You said.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. 54. Isness.
Okay.
Isness. I cannot gather the intent of my life by digging a hole to crawl into. Instead, I must assemble a mountain. I want to surrender to a pile of what is and not be conquered by it. I want to turn it carefully in my palm, weigh the substance of it, taste its sweet and its salt, touch its foam and sharp edges. Most of all, I want to surrender to the mountain of myself, stone by stone, volcano to avalanche, and climb. I will sail this imperfect vessel until it empties, another waning crescent, spilling stars. So it's sort of to me, and I think it's kind of a theme that runs through a lot of my poems is sort of trying to find the wholeness that is whole, not the wholeness that we would necessarily choose, but the wholeness that is whole, and being really inclusive about all the different areas of our life and different parts of ourselves. So that's isness. So I could talk about the history of just of Moonful of Moons, which then like leads into the other books, because that's sort of it's sort of like how I went from being a reader of poetry to a writer of poetry.
Yeah. How did you do that?
Yeah. So when I was in grad school, I was obsessed with poetry, and when we moved in about 2005, my husband and I moved to Connecticut from San Diego. We were living at the time. We were in a new state. We didn't know anyone, and then we had our first child. And so we were all alone as parents. We didn't know anyone, and we didn't really have a mentor for motherhood either, because I should say my mother had schizophrenia and was very difficult. It's very erratic, abusive behavior, and very difficult. So I was at the point where we were living away from anyone that we knew, new parents, kind of having all these stressors in our lives. And I had started blogging, like you said, and no one really read that blog because it was mostly kind of conversations with myself. And there was a point where I kind of thought, you know what, I need to find a way to be happy, even though circumstances won't change. Things are what they are, but I need to be happy anyway. And that's when I started to write poetry. It all kind of just started pouring out at me, like complete poems, or mostly complete poems that were kind of questions that would answer themselves by the time I got to the end. And it kind of, by the end of a couple of years, I had over 100 poems. Wow. And not all of them made it into Moonful of Moons, but I would just lay them out on the floor and order them according to the phases of the moon, because the moon had become a metaphor to me of trying to find light that has known darkness. And I kind of, like we said, you wanted to talk about happiness too. I mean, I kind of think that there are two kinds of happiness. There's that like easy happiness, like of a kid eating ice cream, that easy ice cream happiness.
Yeah.
And then there's sort of that more almost adult, if you will, happiness, because at this point we've all seen sadness and loss and all of this, and finding happiness in spite of that. And that's I think the process. And we I think tend to one is still try to find that ice cream happiness all the time, but I think what we need to focus on is finding that happiness that is kind of whole, that like acknowledges our whole journey.
Yeah.
So anyway, let me just read a couple from Moonful of Moons. I know this is not the
no,
I
think
it's really just it's kind of the journey, I guess, if you will. So where's the camera? Moonful of Moons. 48, and there's a tanka at the bottom, which is a 5-line Japanese form poem. And tankas don't usually have titles, but this is part of a series. It's called Mental Illness. She left slowly, so slow. It took half a life to realize she was never here. She left slowly, so slow. It took half a life to realize she was never here. And I should also mention that like none of the poems in Moonful of Moons were previously published because I didn't know that's what people did. I just completely just didn't know. I just wrote a book and I'll read on 61, Matriarch. I've let go of the illusion that someone else will lead the way. No one will take the reins. No shining light shows the path. It's time I owned it with the dark corners, sat in the dusty throne, claimed the family heirlooms and taught the dying things. I will set down the weight of denial to lift an honest living. It's time to trust the instinct that brought me here today. The will is strong but uncertain. Who will teach the children to sow? I look to the elephant matriarch leading her herd. Does she ever doubt herself? What does she do when the lions roar in the night? She trusts herself as I do. I will. No one stands above me now. I mold in perfect clay. I shape the days of family as I will our way along. Our path is forged alone, the labyrinth has straightened, while walking crooked roads, a new land has awakened. And I love that one, how with the choice to kind of just like have confidence in yourself, it snaps into a rhyme.
Yeah.
At the end there. The last one I'm going to read from Moonful of Moons. It's kind of funny. I said how the I kind of was using the moon as sort of a metaphor for finding light that's known darkness, sort of. Well, it occurred to me at the end of the book. I mean, the way poems, at least for me, sometimes will answer themselves. I was waiting for the poem that answered the question of the book, and then I thought, you know what? I'm not a moon. Silly as they sound, I'm not the moon. I can shine my own light. I don't need to like reflect it from whatever circumstances are around me, because there might not always be light around me. I can still shine my own light. So that's pulling, and that finished the book. So 107. It's pulling down the sun. The moon breath we see is an illusion. The moon is always full, yet mirror empty. Unlike the moon, I own the light I shine, as my fire grows in brightness, spiraling outwardly. So I pull down the sun and glow from within to see possibility in a star field overarching. There is a constellation of which my light is a part. I sculpt the shape of it and tell its mythology. And I find like a stone, I am always the perfect size. I am the stone of my skies. And at the end there, that stone thing, I was walking along a beach and I picked up a stone and I thought, we never say that a stone is somehow wrong. Like this is a bad stone. We just accept that a stone as they are. And I thought that's like our personal truths, they just are. So we can kind of just try to accept that a bit more. So that's Moonful of Moons. And then it was to me, it was, I'm an only child. My mother was an only child. So to me, it was kind of a witness too. Like I could put the poems together and then just like let them go. And it was like, I didn't have to remember it all anymore. I could work through it and then just let it go. And it was pretty powerful. And the Journal of Poetry Therapy actually had a 2-page spread on it because it turns out what I was doing was poetry therapy. So, I mean, it's actually pretty great. And but other people said, I never told anyone this before, and they would tell me their story of loss. And so that was, it was really a blessing when that happened. But then a lot of other people said, you know what, I don't read poetry. Which I'm sure you've heard that. I think we've all heard it, right? And so I kind of thought, what is it like to write a book of poetry that doesn't immediately
Mm-hmm.
look like poetry, just so people will pick it up and read it, and that's where
Mm-hmm.
Small Stones came from. But I can go into that. I should just
Yeah, yeah.
reorder here. Did you have anything to? I when I put them
Well, no,
talking
you're
the whole
supposed to. It's
time.
supposed to be you. We're exploring your
Okay,
mind and your
great.
poetry. So, I don't want to talk too
Okay,
much.
this is
I
really
don't want to hog anything. So, um, yeah.
okay.
So,
Cool.
I'll put up Small
Yeah,
Stones on the screen here. This is Small Stones on the River, from the river, I should say.
yeah, yeah. Well, from the river, and that. So it's mostly like haiku and tanka and other. There are these little like I call them like nameless beasts. They're these little like it's like poetic prose, but they kind of to me have the sensibility of haiku, and that when there's like a leap of understanding, and they're kind of magical in some way, and they kind of when you stand in the middle of them, they're kind of bigger on the inside than they are outside, and so they're not haiku or tanka, but they kind of have these threads of them, and I call them small stones because I think about when I walk along a river and I think, oh, that's my stone, and I put it in my pocket for later. And I think words
Mm-hmm.
are the same way. The words can in poems can be that way. Like that really speaks to me. And so anyway, so I will read sort of a so I should say I did Small Sense River completely on my own. I had no idea what I was doing, and I thought I'm just going to
Mm-hmm.
keep it really simple. So there's no page
Oh,
numbers,
really?
there's no table of contents. There's actually more space on the pages
Mm-hmm.
than I thought there was going to be. I thought there was going to be some space, but there's more because I just didn't know about the formatting. But actually, it's great because people use
Oh,
it as a
really?
journal
Oh, that's
now.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, and like writing prompts, like but the only part of it I didn't do was the cover art. My friend in Bangalore, India,
Mm-hmm.
Subhashimi Chandramani, she had the cover of Small Stones in
Yeah, all
Stumbling.
three books
But
are beautiful, and
anyway,
that's something I always
thank
yeah,
you,
we had
thank
Pavana
you.
Reddy on, who does her own books too, and that's the thing people I think don't
Yeah,
realize today is that you can make your own books and make them just as beautiful as art objects as books published by a press or a small press. If you're not, I always
yeah.
tell people if you're not planning on being a professor of literature somewhere and you don't need it for your CV, you might as well just self-publish because then you have control over everything and you can make it the way you want. And stuff comes out
Mm-hmm.
beautiful and it comes out in interesting ways too. Like you mentioned all that white space using people using it as a journal. It's actually a really cool idea that no I've
Yeah.
never heard a publisher think of that before. And I think that's a
Mm-hmm.
great idea, actually, that kind of accidentally happened only because you're stumbling
Mm-hmm.
toward happiness, I guess you could say. Um, yeah, so it's really
Yeah,
great to
absolutely.
self-publish, and I really, just hope people do that because why the hell not? Is my opinion about it.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you though, when you get to three, they start to become well, like
Hmm.
a herd of kittens, and you start to feel like, okay, how
Yeah,
many of these
yeah,
can I
yeah.
handle on my own? But but it is it's really fun. But let me just read a series, and they're all really short. So, and these are all
Hmm.
from Small Sins of the River. Your body is a part of the planet, and your breath is a part of the atmosphere. You are the interface between earth and sky. I am falling in love with the sound of my breathing, with the feeling of my lungs as they stretch and relax. The breath that I borrow becomes the boundless sky, the trees and I marry in the air. You are one of the great expressions of nature. You are a mountain, a field of wildflowers, a fish, a tree growing toward the sun, a curious wind, beautiful, free, a sky looking for its moon, only to realize it had it all along. The way I am sky, the way I am moon. You are only as strong as you let yourself become. You are a seed that pushes through the soil to unfold the waiting flower of you. Nature never asks, how do I look? Or apologizes for its seasons. not even the ones that dull the colors, burn the plains, send animals to sleep for months. Nature is not flustered when it is ignored. Nature knows what it needs to do. It keeps changing tides, spinning planets, breathing forests, folding mountains, erupting sidewalks with blooming wildflowers. Someday untethered, I will surely rise to slip between the light of the stars. And that's like about 7 or 8 small stems, and some more tonka in there, but so that's just a sample. And it was actually kind of amazing to me. I wrote it as something that anyone would pick up and at least check out. But then it was amazing, like yoga studios started to use it at Savasana, and there was a school that had it as their summer reading list and as writing prompts. And there are people that come up to me in signings and say it's their oracle, like in the beginning of the day. It's kind of funny how we think we know what we're putting into the world, but once we let it go, we don't always know what becomes of it. And that's kind of the fun thing of all art. It's like a conversation.
Yeah, it's like the grand dialogue of humanity, I think is what art is. Let me ask, how did you get it out in the world, though? Being your own press. I think a lot of people, I think what's really interesting, one of the interesting things about you is that being a scientist, I think you probably think in a lot more analytical ways than a lot of artists do. And I noticed you have a lot of... you have bookmarks everywhere. You have a lot of like swag, you have a lot of promotional stuff. Like you don't treat it like I'm an artist and my vision is so grand that everybody will find it. You find ways for people to find it. So what did you do? You mentioned it ended up in a yoga studio. How did that happen? How did it end up in the world? Because there's I think, I don't remember the number, but there's something like 2 million books published a week or something like that. So how does your book? Yeah, I mean, it's a crazy big world. How does your book? How did it get out in the world?
Small Sins and Stumbling are this Amazon KDP print. But I think the first time with the yoga studio, I have a friend in Albuquerque, New Mexico, who has a yoga studio there, and she was the first one, at least that I knew of, that started to use it, to lead Savasana, and then I was like, oh, this is great. So I kind of like tweeted that, and I think other people, I don't know, or it came up at the signing. I'm also at, every summer I'm at this festival locally that's called the Open Arts Yoga and Arts Festivals. There's a lot of yoga people there too, and so I don't know. I think just after a while, and then the other thing, because it was, I hate to say the word popular because it's not always a good thing, but because it was clicking with people, let's say, I decided, why don't I just give it away, which is kind of not probably the way people usually think about things like that, but that's how I was thinking. I do these happiness experiments, and one of them I was doing at the time was when you find $1, it kind of can make your whole day. Maybe not make your whole day, but you get really excited and you tell your friends, hey, I found $1 on the sidewalk, And I thought, what if I leave $1 on the sidewalk? That's going to make some stranger's whole day. And it was because, I can't really buy a lot for $1, but it's almost like the dollar is worth more when I give it away. And so I was doing that a little bit around New Haven. I'd just leave it on a park bench, leave it like under a windshield, just, randomly. And it was so fun. Just like, just $1 here and there, not, a lot, but just now and then. And then when Small Sins came out, it's like, what about a whole book? That would be really cool. And so I thought, all right, I'm going to try this with 5 books. Just leave them somewhere randomly in the country or in my area or whatever. And at first I thought, this is this wrong? Am I going to get in trouble for like this? It's just because no one does this. So you think, like, is there a reason we don't do this? Because, and I put like a note inside, you found a ripple of kindness, feel free to share with a friend or keep, and like we can all put something good in the world just by doing it.
Yeah,
And and now it's like the most satisfying thing in the world. And so now I wrote down the number. I think I've done this in 12 states and 9 countries.
Oh, wow.
Because I have friends that like to travel and then that now to the point where book fairies, I call them, they'll like take a copy or they'll even buy a copy, an extra copy, and say, I'm going to this place, you mean to leave a book somewhere? And I was like, yeah, just send me a picture. It's just fun, and it's really fun to give just put something out into the world and not feel like you have to be part of an organization. You can just do it yourself, and all of us can do that. We can all do that in many ways, not just with books and dollar bills or whatever.
But, yeah, that's interesting. I was doing that with rattles too. And I tried to start a hashtag, which is one of those things. It was just like an idea that I didn't really, really push very much at all. But I made the hashtag "Leave Your Lit," and I thought it would be fun to, after people read their literary magazines, to leave them in. I started with I was getting my oil changed, so at my mechanic shop, and so I took a little picture with that hashtag, and I did a few doctor's offices and things like that. And really, everywhere I go, I kind of forgot to make it a Twitter thing. But still, everywhere I go, if I go to a doctor's office, I just leave a copy of Rattle or a copy of some other literary magazine, and with all the O Magazine and Sports Illustrated and whatever they have there, because poetry's never there. And I've talked to a couple of doctor friends of mine, and they say that the problem with subscribing to magazines actually is that so many people leave with them that it's actually hard to keep their magazine racks full. Because people will be like half reading an article, and then they'll not want to stop, and then they'll be called, and then they'll steal it, and so the magazines keep just disappearing, and it's kind of frustrating. But if it's people taking literature, I think that's a great thing. So so I think it's great to leave your lit, and the only problem with Rattle is there's so much content that's not necessarily positive. It's kind of I don't know if it's X-rated, but there's a lot of R-rated stuff, and there's a lot of things that might have different kind of reactions from people. So I always wonder, who's going to pick this up and take a look at some of the strange things we publish. But with your books, they're very positive and very universally appreciable, or appreciable, is that a word? Whatever the word is. They're the kind of things that you really can leave there and have people be glad that they picked them up for sure.
Yeah, well, that's sort of, that was sort of like a love letter to the world when I started to put it, around places. I kind of thought, this is just kind of, I thought, after I leave it somewhere, it's not up to me who finds it. It's like out of my hands. And that's kind of something satisfying about that too, just sort of putting it out there,
Yeah.
So, anyway, those are some of my happiness experiments that I do. And another one is just like, if you're in a really bad mood, is to just to almost just pretend that you're happy, like you pretend that you're just the completed, not perfect, but just that person, and you're so happy inside, and you just go out into the world as an experiment, even if you're feeling really down. And it's weird because people will respond to that, and then before you know it, it's like a positive feedback loop where strangers start smiling at you, or someone's like, will wave you on in traffic to go ahead of them, just stuff like. And it's really just, it's interesting. I just kind of I like to play around with these happiness experiments.
Well, that's actually, I wanted to talk to you about that, as a biochemist. Because the mechanisms, the dopamine and the serotonin and the way that they interact with each other, and the way that you can make it so you can kind of like hack your own life in a way, so that you're getting your dopamine from positive. Like I always think of the Twitter trolls, which everybody has Twitter trolls that hound you all the time, and so do we as a poetry magazine, which is crazy. But they're getting this dopamine hit from being negative and dumping negativity in the world, and every time they stir up drama, they get that a little adrenaline rush, and then they get the dopamine feedback loop, and then they want to do it more. And instead of getting their dopamine from a positive place, like putting happiness in the world, they're getting it from putting negativity in the world. And I don't know. So do you think, when you think about happiness, do you think about in terms of that sort of scientific, mechanistic reality that's going on in your brain, or do you not really think about that?
A little bit. I mean, it sounds as if you thought about this more than I have, but I think it is though that if you kind of get yourself started, sometimes you can kind of keep it going. And again, just back to the moon metaphor. I mean, I know it's kind of in some ways it's overused, but just it really spoke to me. I think a lot about the waxing crescent phase of the moon, just that little sliver of light, and if you just lean on that light and kind of push it, it will start to grow into, a new fullness. And I think it's kind of what we're talking about here. It's kind of getting that loop started.
Yeah, yeah.
Just finding different ways to like jumpstart your brain again, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, and making the positive things a habit is, I think, so important.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Do you want to read some more poems, maybe from the new book?
Yeah, yeah. So,
or whatever you want. I don't want to push you. It's your reading. Read whatever you want.
Yeah. Well, thank you. But I totally appreciate being here. This is very cool.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's so easy for me, and it's really, I get to meet all the poets we publish now. It's really cool. Without having to leave. Like, I love our little town we live in, so I never want to leave, and now I don't have to.
Yeah. That festival. So, okay, so I'm going to just go through, skipping several pages at a time, but stumbling toward happiness. So if I forget to say the page number, just, it's all in order.
Okay,
it might
I'll flip through.
Skipping several pages, yeah, exactly. Okay, I'm going to start on page 5 with break. And this is sort of, I think you almost have to, it's hard to talk about happiness without talking about sadness. And I think by seeing someone's sadness, you can kind of understand their happiness more. You can kind of see what their happiness means to them and what they had to kind of fight against to get to their happiness, and it's sort of, it's in balance, like it's an equilibrium, right? Like, so I guess I do think of it in some ways in a scientific
Yeah, I think, well, you can't help it. I think once you start, if you're an analytical person, you analyze. I think that's what you do, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I am what I am,
right?
right?
Yeah, we all are.
Okay, so on page 5, break. And this is about the moment that I accepted the fact that my mother would not recover. So I think just starting with the sadness and going into, So here's break. On the floor, face wet, the carpet rough. It felt like looking over a cliff. No, not quite. Am I floating or falling? What a relief it is to reach the bottom and survive. Finally, from the sea trench of this particular ocean, there was nowhere to go but up. Now there was only up. Skirting the edge of sadness, not even light can escape this event horizon, but it won't quite get me. Page 9, freedom. He said, "You have cast off many oppressive anchors, but there is one anchor remaining. You are circling around it. It is time you left out some rope." Thinking in terms of symbols can be helpful, and this one made sense to me. A circle made wider will eventually touch the horizons. I floated in the nighttime sea, its darkness washing over me like ink. The morning bled me in. I could not tell me where I'd been. On the same page, heliotrope. And just about that, noticing the sunshine, like those initial sparks that we're talking about of happiness. Heliotrope. I walk out of the house. The sun is shining, so I lift my face. If I could just notice the sunshine, feel its warmth, be for a moment the leaf of me. Bask, just bask. This warmth has been mine before, and it will be mine again. Let me brew this morning into a nectar that somehow sustains me. Sunrise sky, the fists of cherry beds begin to open. Page 20.
Before we go on, let's take a little stick a little thumbtack there. And I think we should maybe explain a little bit about the haibun form itself, because I think a lot of people might not know what it is you're reading. I meant to get to that before we got to this book, and I forgot. So explain how you got into haibun and what they are, if you don't mind.
Sure, absolutely. And actually, because there were some questions about that in small sense, I included in stumbling. I included notes about the poetic genre in the back of the book, because I figured there are a lot of questions about it. It's not a common form. I didn't know about it, for a long time. So it's a three-part. It's a three-part. A haibun is a three-part poem. It has a title, a prose paragraph, and a haiku. And the way I think of it is that there are three parts of the triangle, and they're all equal, and they each have to kind of pull their own weight. They can't repeat each other. One can't really dominate. And the meaning is in the middle. So you have to leap into the middle and kind of see these parts and kind of gather the meaning of the poem from that. To me, that the hardest part to write is the title. Yeah, it's really hard. And in this, we talk about, having a good title that describes everything. But in this series, I kind of wanted to be one-word titles, and most of them are. But and the other ones are some are tanka prose. So a tanka, I should say, a haiku is not 575 syllables. I mean, you can write haiku in English that way, but they usually are too wordy. Usually it's just like a one breath observation based in nature that has two halves, and you kind of leap across the two halves, and it's a little epiphany or aha moment, and they're kind of magical in that way. It was actually really interesting. Richard Gilbert a couple of weeks talking about haiku, and that was cool. And tanka is a 5-line poem related to haiku, but it's more like I think of it as a song. They're a very short song. They're very melodic, but again, there's usually some sort of epiphany or that comes along with them. And when you have instead of a haibun with a haiku at the end, there is a tanka at the end, and that's tanka prose. So there's a title, a prose paragraph, and a tanka that's called tanka prose. So this is both. There's both in this book.
I think of the haibun is a really interesting form, because we were talking about with Richard Gilbert about the way that poetry is a way to access sort of the ineffable, or the things that you already know but don't really know how to articulate. And there's a way, there's a really interesting way where the haiku uses language to do that. It uses juxtaposition and metaphor and these leaps of logic and connections that you didn't know were there. But then the prose part shows how you can also use narrative to get there. And you can explore things through storytelling. And so they're sort of about the same indescribable thing, but done from the completely opposite angles. So they're always really interesting to sort of demonstrate for people, I think, what poetry really is doing, which is sort of exploring the world and finding new ways to make understandings and meanings out of our experiences. But you can do it through language, like purely language and metaphor, or you can do it through narrative storytelling. And so the haibun is a way to do both at the same time, which is really interesting, just as a demonstration of how that works.
Yeah, and I think originally they were used as sort of travel journals, and so, but I was kind of thinking of them in terms of going someplace, like on a trip. You're going someplace in your thoughts, and so it's sort of like an internal travel journal, if you will, is what stumbling is. So
that makes a lot of sense.
But so I can read some more.
Please do.
That's sounds good. Okay, we get a drink of water here. So Okay, on page 20, Metronome, it's sort of the idea of the big steps we take are made of little steps, and the little steps are the only way to really get there. And that, I think with happiness, it's always a work in progress. So it's just about that, keep stepping, keep moving, you know? So this is called Metronome, which is about that rhythmic walking. Metronome. My task is to learn how to walk. Just walk on the spinning ground amid the coolness of clover and the echoes of morning doves. Just walk as best I can, with grace, and not judge myself or others too harshly when I stumble, or we stumble, on this uneven ground that is the place of our stepping, the land upon which we learn what it is to walk. Cathedrals of trees erect a stained glass ceiling, blue and green, my rising prayer, as clumsy as begging. On page 24, reflection. And this is sort of something I play with too, is a little bit, is different ways of knowing. There's science and logic, but there's also is faith. And I was raised in a very oppressive religion, so faith was difficult for me for a long time. And so it's interesting to kind of be able to see things from multiple perspectives, I guess. So reflection. At night, the bright side of the moon indicates the location of the set sun. The sun is no longer visible, but I know it is there. Call it science or a lesson in object permanence, sure, but there is a type of faith in it too, like knowing the planet spins while I sleep. My faith is not groundless, just a belief that a source of light remains, even if all I can see are traces of it. Weary of winter, monochrome minds awaken to spring. Oh, taxonomy, which is in thank you.
Oh, our pleasure.
It was the summer issue, yes, and that's in here too. But it's just about how difficult it can be to kind of pull apart the cause and effect of our feelings and our experiences, you know, and just trying to figure out our basal state, our base, you know. So taxonomy. Oh, page 33, sorry. I did not know what I was carrying. Despair, anguish, denial, co-evolving hosts and parasites. You might be carrying something too. We might not remember the births of our beasts, given the complexity of their narratives and their various gestation periods, but I work to untangle the sticky phylogenetic heap of them into individual animals. As I set my burden to rest in the sunshine, I find that every mess is finite. I name each creature as I free it and stroke it lovingly behind the ears. They cannot help what they are, or that I coddled them so long. I welcome the ones that belong to me and tame my cluttered ecology. The rest are released to the wild. Sleeping summer, my deepest grief, rolls over. On the same page, labyrinthine, and that's just about honoring the process, not expecting the destination, because I think the destination is in the process and our challenges and what we get from our challenges. Labyrinthine. Each step in the forest helps me see around a different tree. One tree is a clarity I found while walking here. The river is a meditation of what it means to roam. Some stones set themselves as cairns to show I have not fallen off the map, while the wind urges me to quit the compass. How much of life's richness here beneath my feet do I miss while I search for a clearing beyond the populace of trees? I cannot let my intention discredit this essential wandering. The questions are pointing me to the quests held within them. Clarity from the swirling eddies, a planet coalesces from silt just about every day. Oh, I'm just going to keep on going unless...
Yeah, keep going. We haven't done... I'm trying to learn how to balance, how much poetry and how much talking we should do. Because both are fun. And I don't know. So, why don't you read a couple more?
Okay, all right, sounds good. 39, primitive, and this is when I really is special to me as I get older. This summer I turned 50, so it's actually this is great. Primitive. I am learning to honor my topography, my sunlight and shadow, and flaunt whatever natural, unadorned beauty I have. Worry and laughter fold themselves into creases as my hair tumbles into waxing crescents. These days, I wear the plumage of a well-traveled bird, and I own my markings like a tree owns the texture of its bark. Her hair, a silver tangle of moonlight, she returns, eyes wild with forest. And one that's kind of related to that on page 40 figure. And this is when I was thinking about the transience of life, and also Michelangelo's sculptures. And it came out this way. So I am a living artwork, muddy and messy. I touch the scar on my left hand that shows even a dull knife can cut. I touch the angry word and see it too is made of letters that pull apart. I touch a wrinkle and consider that the body and the soul tell different stories. As my body ages, my soul becomes lighter. This is how the marble of me is carved into a sculpture that will one day release the angel within it. Shell Beach, the armor we give up to grow. You can see the Michelangelo in there.
I love that that metaphor. As my body ages, my soul becomes lighter. That's a really cool way to think about life and death. I think one of the interesting things about this book, if I read it right, these the prose were from your an old blog that you did, right?
Yeah.
And so the and that was, I think I read it was 2006 or something. Is that what you say in the book? Like that you were doing that?
Yeah.
So it's almost like you're in dialogue with your former self, right?
Yeah. Exactly. That's exactly right. I had all of these, these posts that, I thought were actually pretty cool, just that no one was reading them, and that was fine because it was for me. But then I still had them. And then after I started to write all this tanka and haiku, I kind of used those blog posts as writing prompts for myself, so I could kind of channel in that former self into this newer self, and kind of, like you said, like a conversation.
Do you have the experience? I'm just kind of curious myself. Did you feel like the former self was an entirely different person? Because more and more lately, I don't know if it's a getting older thing, but I feel like every sort of day of me is like a different me. And I barely remember doing all the things I have to do. So I sort of have to trust that I did the right thing at that time. And I'm kind of realizing that sense of, I'm me today, but the me from 10 years ago is not the same person. Did you feel that as you were writing these haiku and tanka?
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I don't feel, like some of these things I talk about with the different stages of the process of kind of stumbling toward happiness, that journey. I'm not at all those
Yeah,
stages
yeah.
anymore, but it's kind of cool because those were
Hmm.
real and authentic, and so it's kind of cool to kind of tell a
Yeah, yeah.
story with them
Hmm.
in a way. Yeah, I agree with you
Um, yeah, well, we're
completely.
coming up on 7 o'clock, or well, 10 o'clock your time.
Or 10 o'clock.
So, so I don't know. Do you think
Yeah,
we talked about happiness enough? Is there anything you want to add about it? Like I don't know. I just think happiness is such a fascinating topic because it's one of those things that I don't think
yeah,
people we it's one of those words that we don't like. I had to look up the definition because it's such a common word that almost means nothing. you
yeah,
know I when I think about happiness, I
right.
also think of back like 20 years ago at the beginning of online dating. I think there was like OkCupid or something, and you'd check out a site and everybody would say, I like to have fun. And I just thought about that fun. Like, what the hell does fun mean? I mean, like, you assume that fun for you means something, but fun for you
Yeah.
is not fun for me. And there's a weird way we do
Hmm.
that with happiness too, where we don't really have the definition. Like, there's the dictionary definition, and then there's this way like, huge connotative way that we think about it, which has nothing to do with the dictionary definition, which is more about, like you're talking about stumbling and the journey. And it feels to me like the pursuit of
Hmm.
happiness is really what we mean by happiness, or like fulfillment is really more what a lot of people mean. Anyway, what is your conception of
Well,
happiness? It's kind of the main thing I'm curious about. So let's talk about that and then close out with a few last poems.
okay, all right, that sounds great. And I kind of I agree with you. I mean, so I think people a lot of times are still after that like ice
Mm-hmm.
cream happiness, or and kind of, but I did the same thing as I do when I'm writing a poem. I look up the definition of words that I
Mm-hmm.
think I already
Yeah.
know what they mean,
Yeah.
you know. But it was interesting because a lot of times the word joy is kind of used to mean that more stable, deep happiness, and
Interesting.
happiness is used to mean
The
that like
fleeting. Yeah.
surface
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
fleeting, based on circumstances,
Yeah.
happiness. And everyone's happiness is unique. I mean, your happiness, my happiness are not
Mm-hmm.
the same happiness. But I think when we're always trying to seek that destination, we kind of miss what is, and we also miss that things are not perfect. Things are never going to be perfect. I mean, but that's the way they're supposed to be. And if they were, I think it actually would be worse in a way because when we
Mm-hmm.
struggle and when we need help, that's how we
Yeah.
learn
Yeah.
empathy and how we
Mm-hmm.
learn compassion and how we learn gratitude. And when we if everything was easy, we would never learn how to be strong and have patience, and I mean learn how to
Mm-hmm.
really love, because love is based on like things aren't perfect, but I love you
Mm-hmm.
anyway, as opposed to I like you, which is really very more surface.
Mm-hmm.
I like you, those two. I acknowledge that things
Mm-hmm.
are not perfect, but that's love. So it's actually, there's a lot of positive things that come from imperfection and being on the path, as opposed to trying to find some destination, which we really won't, I think, unless except in like momentary
Mm-hmm.
you know times. It's but I think when we can simplify our lives, we kind of can cast off some of those blankets that of expectation, or just things that kind of pile up on us, to connect more with that
Mm-hmm.
inner joy that is more stable, and that takes
Yeah.
practice.
Yeah. It,
So that's just the way I see it at all.
yeah, it's just so interesting that there's so many words we have that have so many different
Yeah.
meanings that are completely unrelated, really, in
Mm-hmm.
a weird way. Like you can just see how limited language actually is when you just look at some words
Mm-hmm.
like happiness, and that's really the
Mm-hmm.
need for poetry is to make clear what that
Yep.
happiness actually
Mm-hmm.
is. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so
You have, yeah, to express what is beyond words
hmm
using words. That's how I
yeah,
think of
yeah,
poetry.
that's
Yeah.
what it is, I think. Well, do you want to
Mm-hmm.
finish out with a few more, maybe like two more poems or something like that?
Okay. Sure.
Okay.
Let me see here. I did actually really like narrow it down. So, okay. 79, Wildflower. To be without scars is to be separate from the world. To be in the world is to be sullied and stained with striving and transcendence. Under the skin of living, I am coalesced and complete in this moment, born of a universe built on unending love. My form contains the balance of this physical plane, while my truest source sings its notes of eternity. I am born into wonder as my natural state, untamed, unashamed, vibrant. There is nothing to find beyond this abundance of inner being. What is layered on top is secondary to this. Nothing but love and truth and yes can persist. The matter of all things continues to expand. So that's Wildflower. And I will end with Ready, 81. And to me, this is, with this, I think about setting aside our own self-imposed limitations, embracing possibility. Ready. If you want to enter the roots of a tree, say a grand oak or a modest maple, you will find a way to fit. This is where the magic begins, like a capillary action that asks us to rise to unimaginable heights above common disbelief and denial. Once in the xylem, we stretch and branch into endless possibilities of wonder, all pathways sincere, the syrup of it carrying us onward like a great unlearning. Because when we emerge into all that is green and shameless and waiting like paper, when we become the leaf, we find a benevolent sun that has been eager to enliven us with its primordial palette. We find an unutterable compassion that has traveled through space and time to apply its vibrant brushwork to our bare base, a reaching that has been ready to dazzle us all along. Blackbird from a morning shadow lifting.
Yeah, I love that haiku at the end. And I feel, I have to say, that when I read a haibun as a submission, I always read the haiku first, because if the haiku isn't any good, there's no point in reading all the and you have really great haiku. How just to finish off, how did you get into haiku? I think your the blurbs on the back of your book come from all the really well known haiku poets, or a bunch from Alan Summers, Michael Railing, and Terry French, who are all big in the haiku community.
Amazing.
Did you recently get into haiku, or how did that happen?
No, well, actually, so back when I had my blog, I started on Twitter. I've been on Twitter I just was told I had my 11th anniversary on Twitter. Like, wow, is anyone having an 11th anniversary? That's that's wild, right? But so, just as an outlet, and I kind of met other poets really easily, or at the time I wasn't really writing that much, but then I kind of found the haiku community, because haiku and tanka lend themselves really well to Twitter. And I was so fascinated. And so I asked some friends in that community, like, help me to learn this form. This is so cool. And I would just I kept on working at it. And it wasn't until after Moonful of Moons was published and out in the world that I submitted to a journal for the first time, and it was haiku at that point, because at that point I was already hooked.
Yeah, people get hooked. Yeah, they do. It happens. Well, anyway, Kat Lehmann, thanks so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure talking to you and looking at these 3 books. And I'll see you soon. Keep everything coming.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Tim. I appreciate it. Bye.
So once again, we were looking at Kat Lehmann's 3 of her books. The most recent is Stumbling Toward Happiness, which is those haibun and hybrid poems. A lot of tanka prose is what you'd call it when they're tanka at the end instead of a haiku. But So Stumbling Toward Happiness. Then we also have Small Stones from the River and Moonful of Moons. So 3 books by Kat Lehmann. I think you can pick them up. Amazon is where to buy them because they're published on Create Space, but Kat Lehmann's press is 29 Trees Press, which she started. And I meant to ask her if she's interested in publishing other people or just these are for her own books. But check out 29 Trees on Facebook and check out these books. So let's move on to the open mic. As always, this is how the open mic works. If you send me a quick chat message over Skype, I will reply and let you know that you're on. Try to read, well, I don't know. I mean, it's totally up to you. But Kitty Carpenter just texted me a little while ago and asked about if people consider these poems published. If you read them, if this, because it's going to be archived on YouTube. If it's an unpublished poem, will a journal want to publish them later? I think it's ridiculous that a magazine wouldn't, if that's the case. But someone might. So you might want to consider only reading already published poems for that reason. But the choice is totally up to you. And I think, for Rattle, I would not care whatsoever if somebody read it, because it's the same thing as an open mic. It's recorded, so I guess it's published and it's public. But print, and technically, the copyright for print versus audio and video are entirely different copyrights anyway. So, whatever. I don't know. So you might want to read poems that are already published, and you might not want to. So that was for Kitty Carpenter. She was asking about that, and it was hard that because there was a lot of talking in that interview. It was hard to write back to her chat message. But we do have Emilio Puerta wanting to call in on Skype, so we'll get to him in a little bit. But first, let's do a couple pre-recorded open mics. And once again, if you want to call in on Skype and do the live open mic, just give me a chat message to Rattle Poetry. That's our handle. You'll find it easily enough. Let's see what we've got. Let's start out. We were going to do this last week. This is Elizabeth S. Wolfe, who is featured on episode... Where was she? Episode number 4 of the Rattlecast. So if you like this poem and want to hear more from Elizabeth S. Wolfe, of course, we published her chapbook, Did You Know? And she sent this in for the open mic. And she's from, of course, Merrimack, Massachusetts. So let's give this poem a read. This is Elizabeth S. Wolfe.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Wolfe. I'm calling in from Massachusetts. I was blessed to read last week as the author of the chapbook Did You Know? And one of the things I talked about last week was writing with prompts and timed writing and journaling. So I'd like to read a poem that started with a prompt, and in the beginning it was very long. In fact, an earlier version that was kind of the long version was published online at Scarlet Leaf Review. And then as I kept revising, I was tinkering with the beginning, I was tinkering with the ending, and I realized that all the energy was in this one piece, and this was the poem. It's published in my chapbook, What I Learned, from Finishing Line Press. The poem is called Revelation, and the prompt is the quote, "If I were to tell you what I see, would you love me still?" From Janet Longsaddler. Revelation. Here in the pale green hallways, a skeleton is staring, drugged eyes sunk in bony sockets. He tried to starve himself, wasted away to frailty and chills. Now he munches rye toast, walking slowly on skinny white legs, leaving a trail of dry crumbs. Walks past the Jew who decided one night that he was the true Jesus, who walked out barefoot through the snow, proclaiming his message and all that was divine, who was carried back in raving and now sits rocking, 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 cradling feet swathed in white bandages, covering blackened, frostbitten skin, nearly lost toes. He believes the doctors down in the ER drained all of his powers, all of his sacred love. He seeks his debrided skin as if the shredded scales are holy, as if we could still be saved.
Hi, my name's James Walton.
Sorry about that. We'll get to James Walton in 1 second. But that was Elizabeth S. Wolfe reading Revelation. And thanks so much, Elizabeth, for doing this. You can go to rattle.com/rattlecast and find the instructions on how to submit poems for the open mic. And do, like Elizabeth did when you submit, introduce the poem. Say where you're from. Tell what the poem's about. Because we want to feel like we're all here enjoying poetry together. And that's how you got to do it. So be sure to say who you are, where you come from, and introduce the poem as you would at a reading or something like that, because that's what we want to do. Not everybody has the internet capability or the right timing to be able to call in on the open mic. But if you can't, you can always pre-record it like this. But make it feel like you're actually doing an open mic, because that's what we want. And this is also, I should mention too, this is a audio only podcast, which you can find on pretty much everywhere you can find podcasts. So go to SoundCloud, type in Rattle Poetry, go to Stitcher, all those other ones, tune in. The only one we haven't gotten approval yet for iTunes, but we're waiting for them to. They're looking at the podcast, and I'm waiting for approval on that. But eventually, these will be audio only podcasts, so it'll feel like it's actually live, even if it's not. So even if it's pre-recorded. Let's look at the next poem. What do we have here? Let's see. This is The Clinic by Bill Ratner. Let's see, Bill Ratner's a Los Angeles poet, voice artist, and essayist. He's a 9-time winner of the Moth Story Slam, so this should be good. His website is Bill Ratner, that's BILLRATNER.com. So find him there, that's Bill Ratner. And this is his poem, The Clinic. Here we go.
This is Bill Ratner in Los Angeles. My poem, The Clinic, is published in the Loch Raven Review. The Clinic. My Aunt Ellie drives me to the clinic, snowdrifts flecked with asphalt like black pepper on eggs, melting on the curb in the early morning sun. The snow will refreeze tonight and leak more blackened weather down the sewer tomorrow. My Aunt Ellie has convinced my mother I need to talk to someone other than her and the rest of my aunties. There's no one left but aunties. The grandmas and grandpas have died. Most of the uncles have passed on, and the ones who haven't have drifted away like pine logs down the Mississippi River. Even my mom is an auntie. Maybe she is my auntie and not my mom. What's the difference? They all look the same. Bottoms big as Buicks, breasts tinted by sailcloth, and little flowers like spring fling at the Botanical Society. I've had carnal with most of them, in my head anyway. A different auntie every morning before I get dressed for work. Sunday, they all baked me something. It's a plan they have to make me zippy again, like when I was a tiny child. Like in the old days, they say. My Aunt Cully made a half-dozen Swedish croissant, a cream-colored excuse for dog snacks. My Aunt Ellie baked me a half-dozen oatmeal cookies, hard as hockey pucks. They take me to the gardens, and I nab those cookies and skip them across Minnecawaga Pond, splish, splash, splash, like round rocks on Lake Superior. They angle their way down to their deaths on the bottom. Now, Billy, how are they going to clean those cookies out of the pond? Asks my Aunt Ellie. Well, they could just turn up the heat and boil them off like mosquitoes, I say. They don't have heat in the pond. You remember the pond. You used to put your little boats in it. My Aunt Ellie's voice is like a milk truck spilled over in a gully with its engine idling. My mom, or Aunt Mommy as I call her, made me a date pudding that stands up like a penis on a puppy. It just sits there on its plate, angry, shimmering, ready to attack. I was afraid it was going to melt like a tiny child and die in the grass. On the clinic wall, a light goes on. In a dark office, Dr. Nelson, a cramped man, stubs out his cigarette in a moose antler ashtray and slides a stack of ink blot drawings across his desk. These are from Switzerland, like the chocolate, he says. I'm going to show them to you one at a time. You will tell me what you see. He edges his chair toward me. I stare down at the pages, and words come out of me like in a fast game of charades. Oh, this picture's a dead bug, but he's comfortable now. His stripes are not clothing, they're nature's designs, I say. Is he scary? Asks Dr. Nelson. No, he's dead. Rushing through the pictures, I say things like stag, squashed, pointy. I figure the words are related to my thoughts, but I'm not embarrassed. I'm happy someone's interested. Are you all right for time? He asks. I'm confused by the question. Time is a bitter expanse. It yawns at me, cocoons me, propels me like a touch hole at the end of a burning wick. When does your school start? He asks. I glance at my watch. Well, I have to be standing in the hall outside my office bright and early at 8 o'clock, I say. I should go. Yes, you should, he says. A school principal can't be late to school on a Monday morning.
So once again, that was Bill Ratner reading The Clinic from Los Angeles, California. Hopefully you didn't hear me coughing. I thought I had my mic off. But another great reading, and you could tell that Bill Ratner was a voice artist. I wish I could read a poem like him. That was really amazing. Let's try to give a call to Emilio Puerta. Let me turn that down for you. Emilio, can you hear me? I can hear you and see you. I'm going to pull you in right now. And just hang on 1 second. As I always say, for the audio podcast, I'll cut out this part. And hopefully I wasn't coughing. Was I coughing through the last one? Okay, well, yeah, I kind of got a quick drip of water and it was coughing all over the place. Uh-oh, we lost you. Oh, you're doing screen view. Okay, yeah, put it back to you so we can see. Oh, you want to show your poem? Okay, just, let's see, let me pull you in. I still haven't pulled you in yet. Here you go. So you're on, and now your audio and video are here. So if you want to show that, yeah, feel free to show it while you read. That'd be great. This is Emilio Puerta.
From Canada.
From Canada, yeah, from Toronto. I remember from last time, yeah.
Oh, here in Canada. So just going to set this up. So this is my little page, if anyone can see. Am I up?
Yeah, you're up. You're ready to go. I don't see your page right now, but I will in a second, probably.
All right. So
actually, no, I don't see you. So I think you're just on screen. So I don't know what happened. Let's see, on Skype I see you, but your screen view is not working. So why don't you just read the poem? I guess we're not gonna be able to see it.
All right, whatever. Okay. So I'm reading off my writerscafe.org. And I thought I could share screen. I thought that could be a thing. Dang. Okay. My writerscafe.org page, and I'm reading a poem called "The Carousel." And I'll just get to it. It may seem lively, swift, ideal. It may seem languid, dull, surreal. It all depends on how we feel upon the carousel. We rise to only come back down. At times we laugh, at times we frown, amidst the green, red, white, and brown upon the carousel. To try for more velocity, we kick our mounts, but find that we have not so much authority upon the carousel. The music plays its lilting tune, as though our driving force and boon, beneath the sun, beneath the moon, upon the carousel. Still up and down, still going strong, preserving right and shunning wrong, we learn that nothing lasts too long upon the carousel. Should there be breakdowns, brave the trial. Should love be found, stay true and smile. Whate'er we do must be worthwhile upon the carousel. The music fades and warns 'tis done. Our mounts grow weary from the run. We give them thanks for all the fun upon the carousel. However, being satisfied, we shortly find ourselves astride another mount, once more to ride upon the carousel.
Well, thank you, Amelia Puerta. Thanks so much for calling in again. You were here, I think, last week, right? And
Yeah.
it's great that you call in again. I think, not everybody knows how to use Skype, but it's really easy, isn't it?
Yeah, we had
It is, yeah. I mean, you got to step into the 21st century, like Amelia does. That was a great poem. Thanks so much for sharing. I love the refrain there. That was a really good refrain. And poems with a refrain really work well orally, listening to them. So, yeah, thanks so much for reading that. And I hope you call it again soon.
Alrighty, will do.
Yeah, have a good night.
You too.
Okay, so that was, once again, that was Emilio Puerta from Toronto, Canada, calling in. If you'd like to call in too, all you have to do is send me a chat message on Skype, and I'll give you a call when the timing is right. It's really easy, and if you don't have chat or Skype on your phone yet, all you have to do is download the app. It's free. It's really easy to use, and like I said, it is the 21st century, so you should know how to use Skype if you can, because that's where the world's going, man. Let's look up what we have next. So that was the last one. That was Bill Ratner. Let's see. Here's James Walton. He's from Wonthaggi, Australia. And this is his poem, Letter to Lois, which you heard for very briefly earlier on the broadcast. Let's see. Here we go. This is... I should say, James Walton lives in Wonthaggi in South Gippsland in a 1910 house, which was once a maternity hospital. That's interesting. His work has appeared in many magazines, anthologies, and newspapers. He was a librarian, a farm worker, and mostly a public sector unionist. So here's James Walton reading Letter to Lois.
Hi, my name's James Walton. I'm from Australia. This is a poem from my new collection, Unstill Mosaics, which is available on all the usual platforms. I hope you enjoyed. It was previously published in Your One Phone Call in Wales. And the poem is called Letter to Lois. I've experienced falling, but never in such a tumble, twirling like a tin can. I wanted to tell you, without the safety of a cloak's heightened perspective, how much I love your human fragility, the joy in a wind chime, to feel the scissor depth of an ending, the gothic pages of ink, newsprint wrapping a bouquet, the short speech of balloons, the stagey mess of comic action figurines. Tell Jimmy, my favourite one, is still you and me in mufti, holding out our press cards, the ill-fitting fake lenses, my gin to your tonic. And now I'm way past the speed of time's sight, where our shape has no dimension, holding on to this cobalt crypto rock, because I don't want the superpower of living without you forever.
So once again, that was James Walton from Wonthaggi, Australia, reading Letter to Lois. Thanks so much, James. Another great reading and an excellent poem. If you notice, I've already noticed this trend where most of the people who are doing the pre-recorded option are from out of the country. And I think I have a theory already. As we talked about with Kat Lehmann, analytical people are always analytical, and I can't help it. But I think what's happening is that people intend, if they're in the U.S. and they could possibly watch the show live and call in over Skype, they're less likely to do a pre-recorded poem. And the people who are living abroad, and it's like, what time would it be in Australia right now? Like 4 a.m. I think. Maybe not even later. But the people who can't call in right now do the pre-recorded because they know they're not going to be able to. So that means that a lot of people would like to call in on Skype and just don't. So hopefully we'll get more as this show progresses. Let's look up. Let's see what we have next. After Letter to Lois, we have Peter Becker, also known as Twixt, which is his mononym. Um, let's see, where does it go? Twixt is the mononym of poet Peter Becker. He's had poetry published in Rattle, and I can even recite the poem from memory. It is just this. It is leaves pasted on the surface of the water by their lightness. Another great haiku-like poem from Twixt. He's also had poetry published in Prairie Schooner, Stand, Two-Lane Review, and so many others. His chapbook, Less is More, may be found online at Azure Magazine. And he lives in Clearwater, Florida. I met him once a long time ago. I wonder if he even remembers, or I'm sure he does, I guess. But he was living in Ithaca, and I had a poetry reading when my own book was coming out way back, like 11 or 12 years ago. It seems like a long time ago. And I met Peter. He came to the reading. The funny thing is nobody had the key to the bookstore we were supposed to have the reading at, so we did it in the alley next to the bookstore. It was really, really the most memorable reading I've ever done, actually. Most people, people brought candles and stuff, and Peter Becker was there, also known as Twixt. So these are some short poems by Peter Becker. Let's see. I think this is him.
This is Peter Becker. I live in Clearwater, Florida, formerly Ithaca, New York, formerly Los Angeles, California, formerly Astoria, Queens, New York City. I write as the poet Twixt. I'm very happy to submit some haiku. I very much enjoyed and learned from the interview in Rattle with Richard Gilbert. Arigato gozaimashita, Mr. Gilbert. Summer rains touch down. The puddles perfect circles, circle, uncircle. A one-line shorter version, drops, circles, puzzle, puddles. Rivers stream along, speaking simple sign language, they slowly express. Slow-growing forests, endorsing the vertical over and over. Muddy lawn ibis. The orange beak halfway down is halfway up brown. Window. Watching rain, not watching me, watching wash. Meat, playing possum, found by flies, flowers, showers of departure and return. Plant. By waiting a week, I watch it grow. Casting a line, casting its shadow. Birds dragging fast shadows over the field.
So once again, that was Twixt, Peter Becker, reading a bunch of short haiku-inspired poems. Thanks so much, Peter. It was great to hear from you again. It's been a while. Always nice to hear from you. Let's see what we have next. Okay, this is Eulogy by Samantha Hawkins, and this is our last poem of the night, I guess. I'm not seeing the poem by, We're missing Carrie, Magnus, Ratner, so I must have forgot to print that out. Sorry, Carrie. We will do your poem next week. But it's already 7:30, which is the time, 7:30 for me, which is the time I plan on ending these. So here's Samantha Hawkins from Powder Springs, Georgia. She's a creative thinker, dreamer, and connoisseur of all candies, lifesaver related. She's also a frequent contributor to madswirl.com. She's currently working on her first collection of poems, and she's seeking donations of witty one-liners and throwaway idioms to serve as the opening lines of future works. So check her out. When she's not writing, she is thinking about how she can ever so stealthily slip away to return to her writing. And when she cannot do that, you may find her improvising small talk with cleverly rephrased folk song references. So that was Samantha Hawkins from Powder Springs, Georgia. And here she goes.
Greetings. My name is Samantha Hawkins, and I am calling from Powder Springs, Georgia. I describe myself as a creative thinker, dreamer, and the occasional poet. I'm a frequent contributor to madswirl.com, which is basically just a beautiful and brilliant online gallery of creative literature and art. The poem which I'll be reading today is entitled Eulogy. It was written for my mother, who I love more than life itself. Eulogy. You were the wine that drained me lonely. You were the word that killed me softly. You were the minutes that tested my hourglass. You were the ring of glory to my Jupiter. You were the angels shooing my ghosts away. You were the band of fingers galloping on my strings. You were the only song I knew all the words to. You were the Spanish moss green beneath me. You were the skinny denim shorts blue above me. You were my favorite text message in the middle of work. You were the milk before it soured in the gallon. You were the honey before the bee kicked back. You were the Niagara Falls that washed over my frame. You were the brimstone rain that baptized me. You were the winter snowfall that dressed me. You were the summer fruit cocktail that disarmed me. You were the spring wind chimes that awoke me. You were the fall leaves that tickled at my bare heels. You were the hand that cupped my shoulder. You were the saddle that ran up the wall of my side. You were the crack of the belt that buckled me. You were the chopping block and knife that carved me.
It's a beautiful poem, once again, by Samantha Hawkins of Powder Springs, Georgia. Thanks so much for sending that. That was a poem for Valerie, her mother, who she loved more than herself. Very touching, and I actually got to enjoy that poem because I don't have much left to do at the end of the show. But I did find the poem that I missed. So here, we'll finish off with this last poem. This is Carrie Magnus Ratner, and she will be reading, she's from New York, and she'll be reading Golden Hour. And she said, she's an archival audiovisual cataloger at the New York Public Library, a singer, a lyricist, songwriter, and a poet who loves travel. Her first chapbook, Conversations with Dead Composers at Carnegie Hall, by Flutter Press, was published on January 18th, 2019, and her second book, Remembering You as I Go Walking, by Boxwood Star Press, was published on August 23rd, 2019, so just a couple weeks ago. Congratulations on that, Carrie. She was born in Norman, Oklahoma, and she lives with her husband, Rudolph, in Manhattan now. And here she is. This will be the last poem of the day. She'll be reading Golden Hour from her new chapbook that just came out a couple weeks ago. Thanks so much, Carrie. Here she goes.
Hi, everybody. My name's Carrie Magnus Ratner, and I'm from New York City. I just recently published my second chapbook called Remembering You as I Go Walking. And it's by Boxwood Star Press, which is my own press. What I'm going to be reading is called Golden Hour. From Avenue A to Abingdon Square, I traced my tracks toward the setting sun on one of the most loveliest afternoons 1 week before the summer solstice, stopping only for vegan ice cream, handmade by adorable, tattooed, black-eyed, lined angel girls who top off every Sunday with coconut whipped cream and an organic black cherry. That made the trip worth taking. The LES still rang its punk bell since the early 80s. Young punks still pissed and moaned loudly on the street under tagged tenement buildings as old-timers and confused tourists escaped into Russ and Daughters and Cats. On Orchard Street, I was feeling nostalgic, but since I misplaced the boutique where I bought my wedding dress 12 years earlier, I had no business remaining there. 4th Street brought me to Cooper Square, NoHo, Lafayette, and NYU as the sky slowly turned golden. I wanted some more daytime in the East Village before darkness claimed its hold in the city. So I walked to Bleecker, a special street. Sometimes I wish it was a man so I could both fuck and romance it. As the sky grew bands of blue, gray, pink, I rode the N12 home, chasing the last magnificent dregs of this golden hour, of this golden day to evening, crossing under the High Line, lapping by the mighty Hudson towards home, to the middle of the city.
So once again, that was Carrie Magnus Hrodna reading Golden Hour from her new book that just came out a couple weeks ago from Blockstar Press, Remember You As I Go Walking. Thanks so much, Carrie. It's always a pleasure to do these open mics. I have no idea what's coming up, and it's really fun to hear what poets are going to do. So thanks so much for everybody who has taken the time to record a poem and send it in. I meant to say earlier that you noticed Elizabeth Wolf, when she was talked about last week. That's because we have a month-long backlog already of these poems for the pre-recorded open mic. So if you've already submitted, we'll get you eventually. Don't worry. I'm not screening anybody for anything other than sound quality. So whatever you sent will be great. I just have to get to it because we have like dozens of poems already lined up to go over the next couple of weeks. So that's it for today's show. I hope you enjoyed it. Once again, the book of the day was Kat Lehmann's Stumbling Toward Happiness. So pick that up if you can from 29 Trees Press, which is her own press. She's got an interesting story, too, that I read somewhere about the name and where that comes from. So check that out if you can. That's Stumbling Toward Happiness by Kat Lehmann. Get it on Amazon.com, which is the best place to get it. Well, I hope you enjoyed this show, and I hope you send in some stuff for the open mic coming up in the future. Be sure to get Skype on your phone and learn how to use it, and we can do more Skype open mics. Next week, we have Alexandre, who, if you're tuning in late, I read one of her poems from the current issue of Rattle at the beginning of the show is the warm-up poem. Her show called Dissection. But she has a new book called At the Table of the Unknown, and we'll be talking about that, and she'll be reading poems from her book. So tune in next Tuesday at the same time, as always, and we'll see you there. Have a great rest of your week.